but they use a badge for an illusion of justice. Oh, they say you can trust us. Oh, but they use the flag for an illusion of justice.
Hello everybody, hey, how you doing? Hey, so we're here today. I'm uploading my chat with Tracy Keogh, where we talk a lot about Brendan. So this is my chat with her. It's a fairly long one, so I'm not going to, do too much introduction here. Y'all know Tracy Keogh. I think I've had her on the channel now a couple times. So very interesting discussion about Brendan. Here we go. We'll get to it. Hello, Tracy. It actually fell kind of forward. And on the side and kind of forward from the back edge of the cabinet. So, hi, how are you, Tracy? Good to have you.
Hi, I'm getting you in duplicate here.
Oh, because here, let me do this first of all.
Headphones?
Yeah, if I get my headphones in. Because right now you're coming out of my speakers and into my microphone. All right. Hello?
Now, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, this is still weird. Hang on.
Uh-oh. So if I talk, there's an echo? All right.
Oh, it's delayed.
Oh, you got to mute YouTube. Yeah. You got to watch us. You got to deal with me through the Hangout. Mute YouTube. Just use that to watch the chat.
Ah, okay. Okay, is that better?
I think so. I'm not hearing any echoes or anything now. So I think we got it.
Yeah. Sounds good to me.
All right.
Well, first of all, well done, young man. This is
thank you. Thank you.
This has been something great this morning. Well, this morning Australian time.
All right. Thank you. I appreciate it. It's actually been kind of fun. I enjoyed talking to TikTok Manitowoc and John Farrak.
Yeah.
That was a lot of fun. So that was cool.
Mm-hmm.
I look forward to talking to John Farrak again in the future. So, that was pretty cool though. So, J Jax, I've sent you a link. So as soon as you let me know if you have any trouble with that, I'll jump back to Twitter to check on your progress. Anyway, so we're here today basically talking about with you and J Jax, we're going to talk about Brendan, but obviously when I talk about Brendan, I can still talk about Steven, because really when you look at what happened to Brendan, it's obvious that it's because they were trying to shore up their case against Steve. The obvious poisoning of the jury pool, the way that they did the press conference, and the way that none of this confession really comes from Brendan. It doesn't. None of it. Yeah. And the only parts, and that's one of my questions for you tonight, was that one of the parts that kills me is that they offer these ridiculous, uncorroborated facts. Well, I say that I use the term fact loosely about things that Brendan said that can't be corroborated, and then that's proof that he was telling the truth. I'm like, what kind of freaking Mungo world logic is that? I don't know. Anyway, it makes no sense to me, but it kind of leads to my question about, do you believe the majority judges in this case really believe that those uncorroborated statements by Brendan were actually credible? Or do you feel like they were pointing to those just to essentially justify their cowering behind AEDPA?
Okay, I've had to think about this, and I think what it comes down to is the majority were more concerned with finality. So this whole idea of litigation not ongoing, courtesy of Clinton in 1996, courtesy of Timothy McVeigh, I think the finality is a pretty powerful tenement in American jurisprudence. It's throughout statutes. I think most people can look at the interrogation and they will come away with the fact that this is obviously a coerced confession. And that's coming from somebody, myself, who's an absolute layperson on any of this. And 3 years of MaM have educated me, not
Right.
3 years of making a murderer, but 3 years of looking and reading and researching
Right.
has educated me. So I think in regards to the majority at the en banc, that their strict adherence to the ideal of finality, preserved a conviction over the truth, preserved a conviction over innocence. And I don't think, and we've heard it many times before, that when you get to that appellate level at the federal courts, because of procedural bars such as that EDPA encompasses, innocence isn't necessarily a guarantee of of freedom. It may go some way towards freedom, but rarely is freedom granted. EDPA gutted the habeas corpus, so it's basically taken the power away from the federal courts and placed it, more or less front and square at the state courts. So for me, I think it was about finality. I think it was also about interpretation. You had, as we know, we had a 4-3, and it's particular judges, I suppose, have their own particular ideologies. And when they're coming into something that has a statute such as EDPA involved, their years of experience is going to inform the way that they decide on that. So I think that the majority value finality above everything else in Brendan's case, and unfortunately, Brendan, fell victim to an archaic law with obscure technicalities.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know. For me, I feel they were cowering behind AEDPA. I feel like even Judge Hamilton at a couple points was kind of like alluding to the fact that, I see some troubling things here.
For sure.
But like he's talking himself out of it. And it's like, it just bugs me. It just bugs me because, you have to see, when you look at that, Laura Nyrider has pointed out to him, pointed out to him where the list was where he could go and find this out, where basically all these facts are fed. Now, virtually none of this comes from Brendan. So how can this be a real confession?
Yeah.
Confessions aren't, if they're voluntary, think about that. Volunteer. When you volunteer something, you do it of your own free will, on your own, right? Not when it's fed to you and you regurgitate. Anyway, I don't know. So I have a bone to pick with the way they interpret AEDPA here, because to suggest that Brendan was given anything close to, special care or anything resembling special care is just laughable in the extreme.
Yeah. Well, I think that you could probably approach 90 out of 100 people in, say, the legal profession, and they would have great concern with the outcome of the en banc decision. It's the fact that the idea that litigation cannot go on indefinitely absolutely obscures the idea of innocence trumping everything else, and I think you go back over even the first Seventh Circuit, and you have Hamilton hinting at vague promises of leniency. You obviously have Williams and you have Rovner, who clearly see these promises of leniency.
Yes.
And he does acknowledge that.
And watching the investigators made their stomachs turn. Anyways.
Yeah. What can we do with that? Unfortunately, it comes down to a statute such as EDPA and the limitations that it places on the federal courts. Their hands are tied to a certain extent, and I'm sure it's a fusion of their hands being tied, their own interpretation of EDPA, and I think we saw the fact that Brendan's innocence made no difference, or the Laura very eloquently talks about, the 27th, the rape was fed to him, all of the various elements that were fed to him. These were highlighted, but yet we still come away with an en banc decision. And Luke Berg was able to absolutely pound home the fact that this is under habeas review.
Yeah.
And in the end, unfortunately, EDPA and the habeas review, the habeas review served no purpose for Brendan. So for me, I was heartbroken for Brendan, for his family, but also for his legal team, that it was the end of like a 13-year odyssey.
Yeah.
And to hit such a 4-3 majority opinion was just horrendous,
Well, the thing is, I might agree with you about them just being strictly adhering to EDPA, but there's the little matter of them regurgitating Wisconsin's BS about the control question.
Yeah.
And
but
regurgitating that BS, to me, it's hard for me to believe that these learned judges don't understand the English language. That's not something I'm likely to believe. So I have to look at it and go, okay, they knew what this said and yet represented it the way they did anyway.
Yeah.
To reinforce their decision, which, judging by that being left in, they felt was weak. And that's why they were trying to throw that in to bolster. And I don't know. To me, it's just it's bizarre, because what happens with that control question only proves exactly how malleable Brendan is in the hands of those investigators. That's exactly what it proves. And to suggest that it proves anything else is beyond ridiculous.
Yeah, I think Berg quoted that Brendan resisted 35 times. 35 times. And it comes down to, I think, what you want the end result to be. So, Berg, I don't think it wasn't his place to go, okay, 35 times. Maybe he was guessing. That wasn't his end outcome. His end outcome was to keep Brendan Dassey incarcerated.
Right.
Wrongly. We know that was, we're all appalled by that. But there are statutes, there are limitations, there are laws. And I think that, unfortunately, the interpretation that we had of the en banc majority of EDPA, and, taking those elements of Brendan resisting, of misinterpreting the control question, as we discussed previously, where Brendan obviously says what, and the connotation of that is changed when it's repeatedly documented as where. So I understand where you're coming from. I am in no way a fan of those 4 judges. It's to me, it was a travesty, just a travesty. But then, we have to look at the broader picture, and we have to look at EDPA and what can be done about EDPA. What can be done? How does it get done? Through what channels can it be lobbied? I think that's a really important point in terms of future habeas petitions.
We need the habeas writ back. I agree.
Absolutely, because
they didn't call it a great writ for nothing, folks. They didn't call it that for nothing.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it's no longer a great writ. It offers little protection.
Right.
Yeah. Little protection for those who are wrongfully convicted. If you think about Brendan, and we've heard from his team that the fact that the habeas was granted was such a rarity. And then to go on to the next 7th Circuit and to win that again was the rarity. For all of that to be taken by the en banc. I can't imagine what that did to his to Brendan, to his family, to his legal team. You know, and
yeah, especially
yeah,
since it was a Hail Mary to begin with to get the en banc.
yeah,
I mean, literally,
yeah,
you have a better chance of being heard by SCOTUS than you do of
yeah.
getting an en
That's
banc.
right.
I
Yeah,
mean, it's like, how the hell did they overcome these odds? How do they keep
yeah,
overcoming these odds? How are they
yeah,
doing this?
yeah,
But yeah,
yeah, yeah. And it's you know, I did look into, for example, what if Brendan Dassey lived in Victoria, Australia? What would have happened to Brendan here?
which was my next question. Would this happen
Yes,
in Oz?
right. Okay. So the Australian system of common law was inherited through the colonisation, through the UK, and there are elements of the US involved as well.
Right.
So we have an appellate system similar to yourselves. Um, but in Victoria, if Brendan had been brought in for questioning, first of all, there's a determination whether he is under arrest or whether he is assisting police. And that's a very big determination that is made.
Okay.
And then you have, he must be, we don't have a standardized Miranda, which I think Carol went into. I
Right.
was listening, which was great.
Yes.
But he must be able to contact a friend. He must be able to contact a lawyer or an interested party.
Right.
He cannot be interrogated in the state of Victoria without an attorney or a parent or an interested party present, and they must confer with each other before they go into the interrogation.
Wow.
So there are those protections in place. That's not to
Right.
say that Australia is this panacea of goodness and criminal justice reform. It certainly isn't. We have some major issues over here in juvenile justice, particularly with our Indigenous communities. We can have a look at the Northern Territory, for example, where you have 100% of incarcerated juveniles are Aboriginal, Indigenous juveniles. So we do have
their didgeridoo after midnight. No, I'm just kidding.
no.
No, they're getting into real trouble. I imagine.
Yeah. But you know, I think you know, it does come down to also, if you've got those protections in place and you call your parent in to be with you, and your parent isn't across interrogations or isn't you know, legally up to speed with what to advise their child of, you still have you know, the possibility of a false confession happening.
Right.
You know, and the states do allow a certain amount of coercive questioning. In Australia, on a state-to-state basis, you have different legislations. It's similar again to the US. So, you know, laws can be interpreted in different ways according to the state that the individual is in. But all of it, because of the UN Convention of the Rights of the Child, which Australia did ratify in 1990, I think it was, there are certain constructs that must be followed. So there must always be presumption of innocence when dealing with a juvenile and an adult, but I'm talking about juveniles in particular. And you know, there should always be priority placed on the well-being of the child in question.
Right.
So, you know, do I think that Brendan's confession would have got through? I think very, very unlikely. In Australia, again, we fall down in this area. We have a population of nearly 25 million people. I think our prison population is around 42,500 people. There is conjecture 3% of those people are wrongfully convicted, but we do not have any empirical data or research into that area in Australia.
Right. No innocence projects?
No, it does. It's not. It's not something that politicians particularly run on over here. You know, we do have the Indigenous issue is something that is getting a bigger profile, and rightly so, because there's been some horrendous stuff coming out of institution called Dondale. Yeah, I think the common law does not permit detention for the purposes of questioning alone. So there would have been a few different things, and we don't. Over here, there's not a lot, and maybe it's because we don't have people researching, but there's not a lot of publicity around wrongful convictions. I think if we look back a little bit, there's about 12 wrongful convictions that have been given a public profile in Australia since 1923, which to me is just outrageous. I doubt all of those statistics, in a country of 25 million people.
Right.
And we have some very seriously dodgy bail laws and sentencing, that goes on over here. So, yeah. To answer, do I think Brendan would have ended up where he is in Australia? No. Yeah. No, I don't. I think there's greater protections for juveniles going through the legal system.
Yeah, I mean, and the funny thing is, when I was talking to Steve Moore, who I am hoping to have on this weekend, he was talking about what it was like to have well, if he had a situation like with Brendan in federal court, which is what the FBI was generally dealing with, they were usually, filing with this United States District Attorney. He was saying that they had very strict rules and everything about how the kind of conduct of how you talk to and interrogate juvenile stuff. And he talks about how it was very strict, and that every time he had a juvenile that he had to deal with, the first thing he would do is call the U.S. District Attorney's office and say, "Hey, look, I have blah, 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 blah." And he would get their advice before he would do anything. But that doesn't seem to happen in all the states. Now, he did say that some states seem to do it. Some states kind of have that same mentality. He said, but like this area of Wisconsin, no, not that area of Wisconsin. They don't have that. So
yeah, there's such disparity between the states in how they interpret the law, the sentencing. I mean, you have states where people are able to go and purchase, medicinal marijuana, yet you have other states where people are serving life sentences for having carried, marijuana on their being. The disparity, I think, is quite frightening. Brendan possibly could have been in another state, and this would not have happened to him. The fact that geography makes a difference in the same country, I think is a really big issue.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, and so I do find that interesting that. It'd be good if the rest of the U.S. could get on board with that and realize that, I mean, it's not like there's not things there to suggest, It's not like it's not right there in the Reed handbook, that if you use the full Reed technique on a kid, you're rolling the dice essentially.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I mean, so there's plenty there, Supreme Court SCOTUS decisions that talk about the fact that you really do have to be careful interrogating a juvenile. And I mean, so it's just not like there's nothing out there to suggest this. It's just that it's being blatantly ignored, you know?
Yeah. Well, that's exactly right. I mean, you have, I think it's Yarborough versus Alvarado that talks about turning to the actual mindset of the juvenile that's in front of you. Laura Narida referenced this and many others. We had 3 judges that got it, and we had 4 judges that didn't care. Do you know what I mean? Like the Supreme Court has, they have special care. Brendan was not given special care. When they reference the state's courts, referencing special care, they talk about Brendan's age, and his age. Do you know what I mean? There was so much more to Brendan that needed special care. Than just the fact that he was 16 years of age.
Absolutely.
I actually went back over the transcripts, because I had transcribed both of the en banc and the first panel.
Right.
and
Oral
that
right? Yeah.
the oral arguments,
Right.
and this absolute lack of care by the state for Brendan's vulnerabilities. They don't address it at all. They just reference the state court's opinion, which was a fleeting opinion. And Brendan was failed. He was failed, and you would hope, but unfortunately, it seems the other way around, that the higher the court you go, the higher the bar is to try and prove innocence. And it's it should never, and we've discussed this so many times, but it should never have gotten out of that trial court. For me, Wiegert and Fassbender, again, reiterating what I've spoken about before, but they knew that they had a young man in front of them with developmental disabilities.
Right.
If you had a young guy that it's well documented that he doesn't understand idioms, he doesn't understand the nuances of language in that way, and yet that's just bypassed by by federal courts.
Right.
Not all of them, obviously. Judge Duffin, who we see recently, has once again acted with a bit of integrity by recusing himself from the Colburn case. Obviously saw what was in front of him. And we could talk for hours about Kaczynski. The fact that he admitted that he was working on behalf of the victim and for the prosecution. Right. He admitted that. That whole ineffective, again, it comes back down to case law. Whether it's Kyler versus Sullivan or whether it's Strickland, the fact that this young guy's life and his freedom depends on choosing at 13 years ago the right case law to fight under. All of those things are just terribly heartbreaking.
Very much so.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, definitely. So, in terms of, to get back to Fassbender and Wiegert, I mean,
favorite people. Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
So we kind of did this before, but what do you think about them? Like, in terms of, were they just overzealous, or did they pretty much do what they did knowing that Brendan wasn't offering this stuff on his own? No,
for me, they absolutely were conducting themselves with an agenda.
Right.
Let's look at the 27th. I think they've got what is it that they're talking about? They talk about the rape. Did he make you do it? Brendan talks about being the crime happening outside of the garage. They put him in the garage. If they've got nothing to hide, if they have no agenda, they're seeking the truth. So they're not it's not their role to feed Brendan these facts. It's not their role to lead Brendan into these areas. Yes. But they purposely do that. They purposely do that because they needed it to fit the narrative. Yeah. And I understand it is probably an extremely difficult line that investigators have to walk. They're looking for the truth. But do I think that Wiegert and Fassbender look for the truth in the most ethical way? Absolutely not. No. Absolutely not. Brendan gave a false confession without corroboration. Any of the information that came out of it that Judge Hamilton decided to hang his little hat on was fed to him by Wiegert and Fassbender, and it was fed to Brendan early. We go back to Crivets, we go back to November the 6th. You have Detective O'Neill telling Brendan, no, Brendan, that's not what happened. This is what happened. You did see Teresa. Right. Conjecture is first of all, I don't believe anything happened at the Avery salvage yard. If it was to happen at that particular point in time, Brendan wasn't there. Brendan was at school.
Right.
So it, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. There's an hour there, and it's hard to believe that Brendan comes home and then the party just goes on, or I say party, but that it just all just continues. I mean, and if you're doing something like that, you're not really looking to bring in other people. You know what I mean? You're not looking to let other people know what you're doing. So it's like, it's just all the things as a whole make the whole Brendan Dassey situation just ridiculous. To be perfectly honest. And
for sure,
and then,
for sure.
And Uyghur touching him, prodding him, and all that sort of stuff. It's like nowhere in this interrogation is there any kind of integrity, in my opinion. It's just ridiculous.
No, I mean, they obviously would have. They're seasoned investigators. They would know that they were dealing with a young man with limitations.
Mm-hmm.
If they are as good as they say they are, that would have been one of the first things that they noticed about Brendan Dassey. And that, for me, is why Brendan Dassey was chosen. I've seen quite a few times on Twitter people saying, and it does take a lot for me not to respond, but people talking about the fact that Stephen Avery would never have been convicted without Brendan Dassey. And I put to those people in my head, because I'm going to scroll on by, that Brendan Dassey would be living his life if he had not been Stephen Avery's alibi. Brendan Dassey would be living his life if he didn't live on the Avery salvage yard. I think that 152 minutes in, Stephen being targeted pretty much summed up that it was Stephen Avery that they were after. And they basically didn't stop until they had enough in which to put forward a conviction, and to take him to trial. We're talking about 2006 and 2007. We have the hindsight. People back then, they didn't. But most certainly, I believe, there's very much a Pizzagate that went on, particularly with with Brendan's more so than Stephen's, because I'm not as across Stephen's case. But, I think it was 4 hours that the Remaker and another officer, her husband, was allowed to go to the jury with pizza and drinks for 4 hours.
Mm-hmm.
For 4 hours.
Right.
That poor kid was just stitched up, he
was, absolutely was.
Yeah.
And more suggestion, more proof of that is like looking what happens to him along the way. First lawyer he gets is actually a family member of the Hall box.
Yeah.
And ends up removing himself, but only after he waives Brendan's right for a preliminary trial to decide whether or not they have enough evidence to try him, right? So he waives that and then walks off into the sunset. Then we get Kaczynski, and it's like, oh, brother. I mean, it's like, and then Frengen. I mean, what the fuck? I mean, why the hell are you not letting the jury hear Brendan recant?
Yeah.
What the? Did you listen to it all? You know what I mean? It's just like, he was so utterly failed by his representation in almost every turn.
Yeah.
It's like,
there was not one legal advocate through the whole trial process, the pre-trial process, that was looking out for Brendan Dassey's interests. We know Kaczynski's behaviour was enough to finally get him removed after the May 13th, I think it is, interrogation. But, and then they, the Fox and what have you Berg talks about that it was the 8 months from Kaczynski leaving until the trial of Brendan Dassey. So, there was no damage done. No, I beg to differ. I believe the damage was done purposely at that stage. because going into a trial with everything that had happened beforehand, Brendan did not stand a chance. We all know about the fantasy show that Kratz put on with a great big smile on his face, to deliver some horrendous news about what the narrative was that they believed, and had coerced out of Brendan. But the fact that nobody knew about O'Kelly, and what he was doing and how he was pressuring Brendan, until Robert Dvorak in 2010, I think 2010, tracked him down. It's that Drizzen, it's that Drizzen quote, the talk at Northwestern, when he talks about Robert Dvorak tracking him across the country and whatever. And I just like the idea of dragging him back.
Yeah, by his ear, right?
Yeah.
Dvorak, like dragging him by his ear. Anyway.
with a suitcase, but nobody was aware of the providence of how that, May 13th, maybe I'm getting my dates a little bit, but the phone call happened, and they talk about this phone call. It was mentioned 3 times throughout, but you look at the emails as well. Kratz talks about that phone call. He tried to use that phone call in regards to that plea deal that they were, purportedly coming up with for Brendan. He was absolutely failed. I think O'Kelly, while we all dislike the man immensely, I think there's still more to what he's done that we don't know about. And I mentioned that about suggesting other sheriffs and other towns that could have been of help to Fassbender in Brendan's case. And, you have to wonder what was the particular skill set that this sheriff had. You know what I mean? Like, you look at O'Kelly, he had this... his resume are like 2-day workshops. That's O'Kelly's expertise. He's this litany of 2-day workshops, and he's heavily involved in workshops for child sex abuse and all that type of thing. And I'm like, you had a child in front of you, and you emotionally abused him. And I think it's Stephen Drizzen who talks towards the end of Making a Murderer season 1, where he says that O'Kelly absolutely traumatized Brendan. And I think you can see that. I mean, they just weren't believing this young guy, and how many times could he tell them the truth? And his own team weren't believing him. I don't know what that would have done to Brendan,
Yeah, I agree. And like I said, I mean, and I've said this before, I mean, me personally, I don't think Brendan ever forgot about the promise O'Neill made. The very, very specific promise that couldn't be disguised as an idiom or anything else. I don't think Brendan ever forgot about that. I think that probably, I mean, first of all, getting pulled over while he was up in Crivets and getting questioned in a vehicle for, however long it was, hour and a half. That's all going to stick out in his mind. It's not like he had been part of a murder investigation before ever in his life. I mean, all this stuff is going to stick with him. And it's like, to think that promise from O'Neill wasn't going, especially with all the reassurances that Fassbender and Wiegert are then giving him and everything. To think that wouldn't have stuck with him is just, to me, stupid,
for sure. And we're dealing with a young man that it's well documented that he's very much a concrete thinker, and that's been referenced many times, and that Brendan is very much a concrete thinker. So if people in authority are talking to him like this, then he's taking that on board. I think he's 95% more suggestible than the general population. So you have a young man who defers to authority, and whatever they're going to say to him, he's going to take on board, and that is so obvious when he's requesting to go back to class. And it's a piece when Laura Narida talks, when she says that's when the bargain was broken for him. When he asks to go back, And they're like, you know, you're under arrest now, Brendan, because of what you've told us.
Right.
And, you know, it shows that he was like, okay, so, that, you know, they say that if I say whatever they want, if I do what they ask, you know, they're asking from me, then I do get to go back to class because, you know, I got to go on November the 6th. I got to go on November the 10th.
Right.
You know, the 27th, they let me go. God knows what they did to him on the night of the 27th at Box Hills, but they let him go, you know. So there's this guy who's
He had an
going,
expectation.
absolutely he did. And why would he not have? Because you do have those promises of leniency. You do have those, you know, I'm a father right now. You know, I'm a police officer, but I'm a father right now. And all of those types of soothing, calming type of statements that to a concrete thinker, to a vulnerable, suggestible young man who's sitting there thinking, okay, yeah, I believe them. Why do I not believe them? You know what I mean? I have no reason not to believe them. They've let me go before. And then when he just says, you know, is it only for one day? If your heart doesn't break when you hear that young man say that, there's something wrong with
one
you.
day, yeah, I know, right?
Is it only for one day?
One day, yeah.
Can I call my girlfriend?
It's like so obvious that the kid does
Yeah.
not understand his Miranda rights. He
No.
clearly didn't get it.
No.
You know?
I mean, he waived it because he had nothing to hide. You know, we talk about that guilelessness and the fact that he wouldn't have gone into any of these conversations going, geez, I better not say this or I better not say that, because there was nothing for him to say. You know, so when you listen to those stories, when you listen to they're confessions, false confessions. For me, they're just stories.
Right.
You know, and it's just
that's what Steve Moore called it. Fassbender and Wiegert had a good story. Anyway,
yeah,
sorry.
but that's the truth of it for me. You know, it's very difficult, again, as a layperson, to look at them and say, how can people who know so much more than me, who have gone to college and who have studied, you know, false confessions, who have been afforded the title of a judge, not get it?
Right.
You know,
Yeah, absolutely.
how do they not get it, Richard? How do they not get it?
I don't know. I'm just imagining because our legal system is so freaking political. It's like sweetheart deals combined with I don't know, other slight issues. You know, I mean, other things that, you know, but I mean, it could be getting into a judge spot. You agree to do something that somebody says because they have the money to, you know, help you win. You know.
Yeah.
So,
I know. I mean, it's you know, one of the quotes is, "We know you're scared of arrest, Brendan, but you've got nothing to worry about."
All right.
So listen, Brendan.
Very vague to me.
Yeah. That to me is kind of like a bit of a promise. You know what I mean? It's like, it's okay, Brendan, you might be scared, but listen, you're going to tell us some stuff. You might inculpate yourself in some things that might make you look a little bit worse, but we've got you covered. We've got your back here.
Yeah. I mean,
and we know
we're like your dad.
Exactly. And I'm going to give you a little intrusive pat on the leg just to make you feel a little bit more comfortable there.
Then I'm going to come sit next to you and put my arm around your shoulder.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
And we know through Fraser versus Cup that the police can lie. The police can embellish and they can lie. And they lied through their teeth to Brendan Dassey. You know, I don't understand how they did that. You know, I don't understand how they did that. We can talk of the tunnel vision of the investigators. We talk of the tunnel vision of the prosecution and whatever. But they would all have been acutely aware of the young man that they were dealing with. You know, and it's you know, I'm not a cop right now. I'm a parent.
Yeah.
Right. Just you know,
I want to come over and give you a big hug.
Yeah.
I know you're hurting. It's like, and Brendan's just sitting there like expressionless, really. And it's
and it's like the whole idea of okay, in Wisconsin, if you lose weight and you cry a lot, then maybe you've committed some sort of heinous crime. No, actually, Brendan was maybe he lost weight because he was, trying to have a girlfriend, as lots of 16-year-olds and 49-year-olds do, and maybe he was, talking about his weight, talking about crying. Why would he not have been upset? His uncle Stephen had just, he'd had his uncle Stephen for 2 years. This is, we know Brendan is a young man who is very family orientated. We can't imagine the type of dialogue that was happening at the Avery salvage yard while this was unfolding, and Stephen was being taken into custody and whatever. It must have been horrific for them, for all of the younger people there, to take on board what was happening. And the simple fact that Brendan was crying means that he was hiding something. Well, that's like, there's some very big straws that they were clutching. Very big straws that they were clutching. And bring it back to that unbunked majority again, that they reference his weight loss. It's like, how about a bit of kudos to the guy for wanting to get a bit healthier? But no. This is about him being involved in a crime.
Especially when he tells you, yeah, a girl broke up with me, and I think it's because she thought I was maybe getting fat or something, right?
Yeah.
Seeing this kid, man, he's like a beat puppy, and like, you somehow think it's good to coerce him. It's just like, oh my God. It's just, I don't know how those two, dude. Yeah. Look, for me, the killer is right here.
Yeah.
Brendan freaking tells them, because when they call him on something that he was, wrong about, or that they ended up, making him flip-flop on, they go, well, why didn't you tell us that, or whatever? And he goes, because I was guessing. And it's like, and they're just like, next subject, right? Because they don't even want to touch that. He's like, I mean, he's got a point blank right there. Boom, guys, I am guessing.
And he says that to his mother as well. He talks about the fact that he's guessing like he did with his homework. And you look at Brendan's IEPs and whatever. I mean, the guy was almost clinical about attending class, and he was very thorough in his approach to school and whatever. But there were elements where he struggled. Homework wasn't great for Brendan, but the fact that he told his mother that he guessed like he does at school, and then you have him telling Wiegert and Fassbender that he was guessing, and like you said, again, they just bypass it. They bypass those. It's like bypassing the slit throat. No. We've got to keep going. There's something else that we need from you. So we're going to. We don't need to pay any attention to that. So Brendan, this is, then they go on to the next thing with him. It's like the body parts on the 27th. Brendan, did you help? Did you help them put the body in the fire?
Right.
Then they talk about hands and feet and stuff. And I think Brendan talks about a belly.
Yes.
And a forehead. A belly and a forehead.
Different words, same parts that had been suggested.
Yeah, but for me, it's like, who would even talk about a belly?
Yeah.
In a homicide investigation, a belly is such an unsophisticated and simple and childish word that you don't have in front of you somebody who's committed this horrendous rape and murder and mutilation come up with the word belly to describe something, or I saw the forehead, and Berg talks about the fact that this was imprinted in Brendan's mind, that he had to get it off his chest and all this sort of stuff. Nah, Brendan was talking about bellies and foreheads. It was unsophisticated because he was a young 16.
That's one thing I always point out about Brendan too. Is that, listen to him trying to describe these things.
Yeah.
These acts, these rapes, these whatever. he honestly is describing it like a kid who has no idea what it
Yeah.
is or what it's about. That's
Yeah.
honestly, I mean, it's like hearing some kid who's heard about it but has never done it and is trying to
Yeah.
brag. If you can
Yes.
imagine how those kids
Yeah.
sound, this is a little
Yeah.
different. He's not bragging, but he's desperately trying to come up with something convincing,
Yeah.
which would be just like the kids who are bragging. So it's
Mm.
like it has that similarity, and it's like listening to him talk about it. You get that, yeah, he doesn't understand. He's never done this,
No.
you know.
No, of course he hasn't. The whole idea, they put him in the trailer. They put him in, they get him to the hood lab. None of this is Brendan. None of this is Brendan. Brendan is nowhere near being in the garage. Brendan's not in the trailer. It's yeah, it's absolutely criminal what they've done to him. And I think that appellate process, particularly watching it play out in MAM-2, in real time as it happened, I would talk to Barb, or I would talk to, close friends as it was unfolding, and people who were involved, and, it was heartbreaking, and it was a lot of different things. But then when you watch his parents on MAM-2, when you watch Laura and Stephen on MAM-2, having to take in the information that what they've been fighting for the last 13 years has been ripped away, I found that really difficult to watch. Really difficult to watch. It's you helped tie her up. Oh, please, just shut up. We get past just
Right.
shut
Well, like
up.
in desperation because they want to use the hood latch swab, right? Or they want to use that swab for the hood latch. So it's like, oh, Brendan, wait, before you guys left the car, before you guys walked away from the RAV4, there was something else. There was something else, right? And it's like, and so Brendan's just like, he has no clue. He's just kind of like, what do they want now? And eventually, they actually have to say it. They have to go like, did he go under the hood, Brendan? And like, oh yeah, I did. Whatever. Brendan's just like, yeah, okay, I agree. And it's like, and it's just like, that is where the hood latch swab comes in. This is the hood latch swab, folks, that has 19 times more DNA than they found anywhere else that day. It has 19 more times DNA. Oh my God!
It is farcical. It's farcical if it wasn't so, tragic.
Right.
That people are living this injustice, and it is Brendan and it is Stephen, but I think for me that I've taken a particular interest in, over the past year is looking at the mothers of these children that have been wrongfully convicted and how this impacts the women behind these wrongful convictions, and looking at the fight that Christina Brazil is fighting for her brother every day. She's on Facebook and she's out there with Anthony DiPippo, and they're fighting for him. David Casale is with them as well. Then you have, I struggle pronouncing people's names, John Guka, not sure, but his mother, she fights for him every single day. You have Dolores Avery, who has fought for her son now for 32 years. You have Marianne Erickson. All of these women whose children have been taken from them, through wrongful convictions, who are fighting. Adnan Syed's mother. I don't know if you watched the documentary recently, but it just finished here.
I still need to watch the Adnan Syed thing, but I mean to.
I've just finished it here in Australia, and his mother broke my heart. All these mothers break my heart, because it's like the mothers of the disappears. Their children are with them one day, then they're not the next. And yes, there's different circumstances behind a lot of these convictions, but there's a commonality of prosecutorial misconduct that runs through them, and other elements that run through them as well. And that for me is something that hope to concentrate a little bit on in writing, and that is profiling the impact that this has on. I know it impacts fathers, of course it does, but I think particularly the bond with a mother and her son is in this scenario is something quite special, and you see these women fighting for their sons, and I think we need to take into consideration that they fight for their sons in the way that they know how to fight. So not everybody is across law, or not everybody gets social media or knows people who has people to help them to support their cause, but all of these women are living these wrongful convictions. And knowing that Brendan's family are now just 1 hour from him, and we heard from Carla the difference that it's already making a difference for Brendan. The biggest difference will be when he takes those final steps home, which I have every belief that he will. But I think it's anybody that believes in the voluntariness of Brendan's confession, without taking into consideration his limitations in a legal context, should not be practicing law.
Right.
Just putting it out there. Sorry, Judge Hamilton, or Kanye, or Sykes. If he was particularly nasty, let's not bypass that one. But
talking about Can, though, did you see one of the MAM promos that Falcon made? It showed me. It was actually when I was in Utah. I was doing a live when I was in Utah, and I was talking about Judge Can. I'm like, Judge Can, for those of you who don't know, he's the one that was kind of like, and I said something like, "Oh, I think he's going a little, woo,"
Yeah. Oh, I think I did see that. God. I mean, he was pushing Laura.
Like, oh my God, they could have picked a better clip.
No, but here's the thing, he was pushing Laura. He was pushing Laura on that, but about the truth. So the truth, and he didn't understand that Laura was saying, but the truth wasn't actually the truth. The truth that the investigators were looking for was the coerced and false narrative.
Yes,
that was the truth. So he's saying, but does the truth not matter, or whatever? I can't remember his exact wording.
But they needed two killers. So they needed two killers.
Yeah.
It's like, no, dude. As Hamilton just said earlier, the reason why they were going after Brendan was because they wanted him to testify against Stephen Avery. Judge Hamilton said it himself, you moron. Oh my God.
And then
saying about these it's like, no, that doesn't make sense.
And then you have Sykes, who was, shall we say, a little aggressive to Laura. I'm just being nice.
I know.
This is the nice Tracy, but and talk about you're trying to get new law passed and whatever, and Laura's very emphatic about saying no, this is decades old law.
Right.
It's that interpretation that freaks me out, that there's such different interpretation between judges, and what informs that perspective. What informs that perspective? How do you have the chief judge of the Seventh Circuit absolutely understanding what has happened, and then you have 4 other judges on the same circuit just not getting it, or getting it but going, do you know what, EDPA's too high a bar, and this is not compelling enough for us to say,
it's not egregious enough.
Exactly. Let's leave it. We'll leave it to the state court.
Yeah. To talk about that bit with Sykes, though, that you just brought up, where she jumped on Laura, right? The more interesting bit about that for me is the way that Judge Hamilton sets it up. Okay? Yeah. He lulls Laura in. Okay? He entices her in. He goes, what would you suggest to law enforcement officers if we were to whatever, if we were to agree with you and decide in your favor? What practical what does he call it? He says, what practical advice essentially would you offer for? And that's the guys. It's under. And she goes, well, we're not here to do that. You know, that's not what we're here to decide. And he's like, no, I understand, but I want you to. I want to hear what you have to say, basically. So she goes ahead and she answers his question, and then like right there, that was the set in volleyball. And then here comes Sykes, wham! You know, slam it down. I'm just like, you guys are freaking disingenuous assholes. Anyway.
No, I absolutely agree. They, you know, there was some,
folks. Anyway.
particularly Hamilton in that sequence. You know, he was absolutely setting Laura up to lead her into a dialogue that somebody else could jump on and say, okay, you're trying to you know, implement new law here. And they, again, it's that misconstruing, it's that perspective, it's that how I'm going to interpret what somebody's saying, because, you know, through all of this, there are so many angles to it. But I think we have this commonality from, you know, the 60 people that were involved in the amici curiae. I don't know. I'm trying with that word. And you know, all of the legal experts, the academia, the psychologists, and whatever. How does the Seventh Circuit not take on board, you know, the science of false confessions now? I mean, we have Rovner who talks about the fact that we do need to bring, you know, people into 2018, 2017 and getting across the science behind false confessions, that this is not just an anomaly, that this is an actual phenomenon that happens to people of all ages and all backgrounds. You know, but it, I don't know, the en banc majority, it was extremely disappointing and heartbreaking, and that work up to the Supreme Court, you know, was again incredible for the support for Brendan, and for it to just fall flat. You know, it was like this apathetic silence from the Supreme Court, and I know that they take less than 1% of cases per year. But as it was, you know, it was stated that this was the first time in 40 years that they had the opportunity to do something in the juvenile justice space.
And on habeas relief, like they would have been able to create a way for juveniles to seek relief through the federal courts. If, you know, I mean, we got to do something to keep these state courts honest, because they're just basically like, you know, they don't give a crap. They're like, federal government can't do shit. AEDPA, motherfucker. You know, it's like, you know,
that's right. Yeah, they're not answerable now. So you had a habeas that was a protection. It was a haven for the wrongfully convicted to pursue their innocence through the courts.
Right.
Now you have EDPA, and you have the state courts almost where finality stops. You know, it's I don't know what else you can say about that, you know?
Right. Well, I have something here that Georgina Stulen-Bose sent me. I think it's pretty special. It's a bunch of, basically in different languages, saying that the Dutch, German, Italian, and French in the Netherlands, basically meaning the Netherlands, Germany, Italy, and Switzerland are behind Stephen Avery and Brendan Dassey. So she has in 4 different languages.
Brilliant.
So everybody want to hear it? What does everybody think?
Go for it.
By the way, thank you, Chase, very much. Obviously, I want to remind everybody that the idea isn't to donate to us here today. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. But the idea is not to donate to us, but to donate to Brendan and Stephen. Just wanted to say that. Okay, so everybody wants to hear it. All righty, here we go, folks. Oh, wait, I gotta...
Nederland staat achter Stephen Avery en Brendan Dassey.
Italia sta dietro di Stephen Avery e Brendan Dassey.
Deutschland steht hinter Stephen Avery und Brandon Dassey.
I love this. This is awesome. Thank you, Georgina.
La suite est aux côtés de Stephen Avery et Brandon Dassey.
Awesome. That is so cool.
Yeah.
I'm going to play that again. I'm going to play those again during my lives this weekend. I love that. That's awesome. So cool.
Yeah.
Okay, I can't hear you. Good. Sometimes when I unplug my headphones and do that, it doesn't quite work all the time. All right. That was cool, though. Wow, that was awesome. That was really... Thank you so much for that, Georgina. That was really a lot of fun.
So, Richard,
Yes.
Richard, question for you.
Okay.
Okay. Who's your main suspect?
Well, it's hard to say. It's either an unknown person or Ryan.
I've just heard you ask so many people. I thought, okay, let's put this back on Richard.
Yeah, there you go. Put me in the hot seat, right?
Yeah, and if it was Ryan, for example, why do you think it's Ryan?
Oh, the day planner, the lies about her getting a lump sum insurance payment for the broken turn indicator, the Cheshire cat smile in court when he was lying. Yeah, the list goes on and on. The news interview where they're asking him if he was on site or whatever and everything. And he had been, but he was lying and saying, no. They had it all crime scene taped off and secured, offering all these qualifying words basically so he didn't have to say that he was on the salvage yard and everything. It's just like so many things. I mean, and there's probably more I just forgot, but anyway.
Yeah. And tell me what compels you to, what started you doing these videos and what compels you to keep going?
So I think I have actually told this story, but I love telling it. So some of you have met Johnny Jack Smith, or as you know him here, Ripper, on YouTube. He has his own YouTube channel. I interviewed him in December during Christmas break. Him and I had a little chat. Anyway, love Johnny. But back in the days, back in 2016, Johnny was one of the original YouTubers right out of the gate. Ripper was, with Casey, who you're going to see on Allie's channel after we're done here, folks. She's going to be having Casey on. He was one of the ones first out of the gate. Well, Johnny and I became friends because I liked Johnny's videos and I was sharing his videos and posting them on Facebook all the time. And so just because I was doing that, he eventually reached out to me. We became friends. And he realized how strongly I felt about Brandon Dassey. He realized that pretty quickly. And eventually got to the point where he was talking with Monica Boxley and her friend at the time, whose name I can't remember. They were running a support group. And they were asking him if he could do stuff about Brandon Dassey. So he made like a couple videos about it. And then he started asking me. He goes, you should start making videos. You should make some videos. You should do that or whatever and everything. I previously hadn't really considered it. I wasn't real keen. I'm like all you. I was just like all of you guys. I was not real keen to be getting on camera and talking, in a public way like this. But my passion for it eventually outweighed that. I was eventually just so moved. I was reviewing the November 6th interrogation of Brendan and everything, and that was basically my first video. And then I was reviewing another Reddit post about Brendan that brilliantly pointed out some of the BS that was going on, and that was my second video. And then I started covering Brendan's court documents because that's when his stuff started, heating up because Duffin had granted his habeas relief. But it was like a crawl. I mean, I was like, geez, stumbling, fumbling, really not. I mean, I'm a far cry from what I'm like now. You know what I mean? But it was, the passion carries you through. When you got enough of it, it just carries you through. I mean, and here I am going nearly every day, 2.5 years later. So
and thankfully that you do that. I think we need we need 1,000 YouTubers. We need. It would be great to get some people from Wisconsin doing what you do as often as you do. I think we need thousands of people just using whatever skills that they have in whatever platform that they can access, and keep raising awareness. Because here's the thing, people may get bored, but Stephen and Brendan need people to be doing this. They need people to be engaged, 24/7. And MAM-2 coming out in October last year obviously propelled a second wave of support, which has been awesome. It's particularly prevalent on Twitter, I think. But yeah, no, I thank you for what you do, Richard. I think you do a great service to the lads.
I'm thankful for you too. You do a lot of great work, so it's feelings mutual.
Thank you. I must say,
you know how I'm putting your face on YouTube, but hey, guys, look, this lady's doing a lot of work for helping Brendan and Stephen and tweeting and looking into the Wisconsin political structure for us when it's necessary, when it's time, when it's that time for elections and stuff. She's the one that's on Twitter letting us know where we could find out the information and learn about the candidates and get educated about what's going on. I mean, she does a lot of work, and you guys would be prudent to take advantage of it when the time comes to benefit from the stuff that she does, because she does a lot of brilliant things. So those of you who don't know, now you know. And knowing's half the battle. G.I. Joe. Anyway.
You've missed your vocation.
So let's see. All right, what do we got in the comment section here? Denise, it's always a good time to tap that like button. Yep. Let's see. They could not foresee the documentary tuning. Yeah, that's another thing about this, is you got to wonder in this, did all these, bad actors in this, did they just convince themselves, well, nobody will ever care about Stephen Avery, right? Nobody's ever going to care. Well, there's nothing to worry about. I mean, you got to imagine that had to be kind of going through their heads, right?
Absolutely. If I haven't read Kratz's book, and I don't intend to, but
listen
I know
to the first 3 chapters. It's
there's a description of Brendan Dassey that I know Stephen Drizzen has addressed on Twitter, and that enough for me was enough to show me that they thought nothing was ever going to come of what they did to Brendan and Stephen. The way he described them with it was like a disdain, and talked about his hair and whatever. It was quite nasty, to be honest. But yeah, for me, when I read that, I thought, of course they didn't think, 10 years on, the public psyche would be turned into an absolute momentum of support for these two men. Will we see something like this again? I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
I look back at the West Memphis 3, and I know that there was a lot of support there, but it was a different time, so you didn't have the social media outlet that you do have now. There weren't YouTubers talking about the West Memphis 3. I've had a look. There's, you get a look at the documentaries, but it certainly wasn't the beast that the support is for Brendan and Stephen. And that's how I see it. It's like a heaving, breathing beast of all of these people and their outrage, Yeah,
absolutely. It's wild, but it's good to see. For me, when I look at it, I mean, back when I first started supporting, I didn't realize that there were so many guilters out there who actually believe Brendan's innocent. They believe Stephen did it, but they actually believe Brendan's innocent. I was kind of surprised to see that the numbers of people that think Brendan's innocent is truly, through the roof. Compared to the people that it's like I said, I thought all the guilters, if they thought Stephen was, I figured they thought Brendan was.
Yeah.
Well, most of the time, but I think that's not necessarily the case. I think maybe half of them actually believe Brendan was railroaded, or there's problems with it, and they're not sure, or that sort of stuff. So I find that interesting. Brendan's case really does speak to people. Even people that are easily willing to send Avery down the river have qualms when it comes to Dassey. They have scruples. They have things that prick. You know what I mean? When they look at Dassey.
Yeah, you could approach Michael Griesbach on Twitter, and he never gives a definitive answer when I've tweeted at him about Brent. He never gives a definitive answer, but I certainly don't get from him that he feels that Brendan Dassey is either he's not guilty or that he didn't receive a fair trial. I think Michael Griesbach is somewhere in there. And we've heard from Ken Kratz before that there's this, whether it's a fake sympathy or not, that he feels for Brendan. Well, if you felt for him, then you wouldn't have given that press conference where you just robbed him of his presumption of innocence. He basically buried Brendan when he did that, and Stephen, of course. But yeah, I mean, in terms of guilters, I couldn't tell you the name of any of them. I don't go near it. There is one particular person that I interact with on Twitter who believes Stephen is guilty and supports Brendan. And it's like a I don't know, a split personality. I'll speak to the part that believes Brendan is innocent 24 hours a day. I don't get into the Stephen Avery part, but with guilters and things like that, I don't want to know about it. It makes no difference.
Me personally, I just like to get out of the echo chamber every once in a while, because I don't necessarily want to just sit in a room with a bunch of people who are spitting the same things that I'm saying back at me, right? So I actually like to go out and seek out that possibly slightly adversarial situation. But I still like to be respectful. But
and that's fair enough because of what you do. You talk about both of the cases, whereas predominantly, as I've said before, my advocacy lies with Brendan. So I almost have like a sixth sense for anything that anyone's talking about to do with Brendan in a positive sense. And if they're not talking about Brendan in a positive sense, then I simply block. I just don't want to know. I don't want it on my news feed. I'm not going to engage with them, because the way that I look at it, I'm not here to prove Brendan's innocence. He's already done that. You just have to look at the interrogation tapes. There you have it. So you guys go and knock yourselves out. That's kind. But I know there's a validity to people taking on those with differing opinions and whatever. But for me, it's like I don't know. It distracts me from the reason why I'm here. So I just bypass.
Yeah, I hear you. For me, I can imagine for you, it's easier for you to stay away from that aspect. But for me, it's different. I just, I like it. I like for people to challenge me on my opinions and my thoughts, because maybe they do have a small point, and maybe I have to rethink something and make my argument even stronger in the process. I don't mind. You may point out something that I overlooked or whatever, but once you point it out, it's no longer a weakness. Because I didn't want to fix it, or I think address it.
Particularly with Stephen's case, because there's so many different elements involved because of the evidence. Where Brendan's case, as we know, and I quote Laura because she's so eloquent, is that it's words and words alone. Do you know what I mean? So it is different. Like, I don't need to get into, like, I bypass Reddit altogether. And you rarely see people taking Brendan to pieces on Twitter. You rarely see that, because there's an absolute army of people on Twitter there for Brendan. You know, it's really something quite special, I think. And yeah, for me, there's no. I don't want to know about anybody's opinion that doesn't believe Brendan Dassey's innocent. I don't care what they've got to say. If you believe Brendan's innocent, fantastic. We've got a common ground. If you don't, you know, I have nothing to say to you. That's kind of where I come from. But it is different because I don't involve myself heavily in both cases. And I think that, you know, a lot of people do debate over the evidence issue, and that's where I'm sure there's a lot of adversarial kind of conversations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
and there is. Hey, but you know, there's adversarial conversations just in the supporter realm. So
Yeah.
unfortunately, we're humans and we don't always agree with each other. But
Yeah.
you know, it's those of us who can argue intelligently, or you know, make our points intelligently without resorting to name calling or any other such tactics. You know, that's what it's about. You know, and it's like
Yeah.
I said, it's arguing with people from the other side helps me hone my own arguments. It helps.
Yeah.
It just causes me to sharpen. You know, I'm on the whetstone with my argument. You know what I mean?
Mm.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
I'm on the Iron Throne with mine.
There you go.
TC. I'm on the Iron Throne. Nobody's removing me from the Iron Throne.
Oh,
Not Danny
yeah,
or
dude.
John.
Dude, it's about to go down in Winterfell. Oh my lord.
Amazing. Just amazing. It's amazing.
That was a pretty shocking episode last week.
Oh yeah. Oh, it was fantastic. Brianna Taff, like she stole the show.
Yeah.
Stole the show. You know. Do you think maybe spoilers, but do you think Danny's going to take John out for the throne?
I think if she tried, it wouldn't work.
Yeah.
I would think somebody could come up and say the prayer for the fire god or whatever, and he would just resurrect again. So that's interesting. I mean, yeah, it would be. She may try. That's
It was just her. It was just her reaction in the catacombs that I thought was quite interesting.
Right.
Yeah, but I won't spoil it for people who haven't seen it.
Oh, it's funny. All right.
So where did John? It was it John that was joining?
Oh, we had J-Jax was supposed to J-Jax the Redditor, but he had some problem with it. He was clicking on the link and it was not working for him. And it was, I don't know. So I'm going to work it out with him tomorrow morning. You know, I don't go live until about 1:00 tomorrow. So it's, I'm going to probably try to get with him in the morning and help him work it out. We're almost done here, actually. In another 5 minutes, Allie will be joining us.
Great stuff.
And she will be with us for the last 15 minutes if you want to stick around. And we're gonna go out playing Something Going On, which is the song Stacy wrote about Brendan. So we're gonna go out on that one. So, Allie will be here in about 5 minutes, and then we'll do the final 15 minutes where we transition into her life, and then you know, so So I'm sure.
So what do you think's ahead for Brendan, Rich?
Well, like I've said before, I think I think Drizzen and Ryder are just going to sit back right now, and they're just going to see the sparks fly, while Zellner, creates the wake, by the, looking, basically searching the wake left by Zellner, basically, right? And whatever pops off that they can use, I think they're just going to continue to collect it and collect it and collect it until, eventually they have a very significant amount of things that they can bring a motion for post-conviction relief. Because that's, as you know, obviously you were there with me in Melbourne, and along with guys like Adam Bills, another good friend down in Australia. But they were talking about the fact that right now Brendan is essentially at the same place that Stephen was at the end of MAM1. That he had exhausted, they've exhausted their regular appeals or whatever, but Stephen still had the ability to file a motion for post-conviction relief, and Brendan also still has that option, that ability. Now he's just got to get the evidence to support it, right? And so that's why I say Drizzen and Nyrider are playing it smart. They're just sitting back. They're just going to wait and see what comes out when Zellner's tearing this thing up right now. So
yeah, it's certainly going to be interesting what comes from Kathleen next. And what's going to happen with Judge Suckowitz. I know you guys.
we call her Suckowitz anyway.
I know.